Hi, thanks for joining me today. It's Geraldine from the Paper Puffin Studio, and today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful card that opens up nicely for display. I believe it's called a double trifold card. You remove the belly band and it opens up like this. The card stands nicely for display, and on the back you have a place to write your message to the recipient. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Now let's get started. Let's begin by reviewing all of the pieces you're going to need to build this card. For your base color, you're going to need 2 pieces, each measuring 6 inches by 7 inches. You'll need 2 pieces measuring 6 inches by 2 inches. 1 piece, which will be for the belly band, and this piece measures 8 inches by 2 inches. And then a piece of scrap that I'm going to use to mat the sentiment for the front. For the front and back center panels, you're going to need 2 pieces measuring 3 7/8 by 3 7/8. And 2 pieces measuring 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. You'll need 2 pieces measuring 3 7/8 by 1 7/8, and then 2 measuring 5 7/8 by 1 7/8. You'll need 6 pieces, each measuring 1 7/8 by 7/8 of an inch, and 8 pieces measuring 7/8 by 7/8. Now for all of the designer series paper. So for the belly band, I've got a piece of designer series paper that is 8 inches by 1 7/8. For the 2 front panels, I have 2 pieces measuring 5 3/4 by 1 3/4. You'll note that when I've cut these, I'm going to be placing them on the front like this. So I've cut them, so I'm going to orient them in this way. For these 2 pieces, these are cut at 3 3/4 by 1 3/4, and I've cut those the same way. They'll get oriented like this. Then I have all of these small pieces, 6 that are measuring 1 3/4 by 3/4 of an inch, and then 8 that measure 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. I've also gone ahead and cut out a bunch of leaves using my Seasonal Layers Thinlits dies. They're a retired die set from Stampin' Up! And I've got another piece of paper that I'm going to be using for the sentiment for the front. So this is just a scrap piece that I'll be cutting out after. Now for my next step, I'm going to go ahead and glue all of the mats to their corresponding pieces of designer series paper, just so I don't lose track of any of my pieces. I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll pick up there. Now all of those pieces of designer series paper are attached to the mats, and then I've also attached the designer series paper to the belly band. You'll notice that for the belly band, the designer series paper goes right up to the edge on both ends. Now I'm going to start with some scoring. So I'm going to take both pieces of the largest piece of the base color, and with the 7-inch edge along the top, I'm going to line this up at 5 inches, and I'm going to score. I'll do that for both pieces. Now the reason I'm doing this step is because I don't happen to have any 6 by 12 paper. So I'm going to make these into my 6 by 12 piece. I've made these score lines, so they're the guide that I'm going to use to line up my papers and glue them together. I'll be putting some tear and tape on the back here and gluing these pieces together. I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll pick up there. Now with my 6 by 12 inch piece of cardstock, I'm going to turn it with a 6-inch edge along the top, place it in my trimmer tight up against the top and along the 1-inch marking on the right hand side. So line up my paper at 1 inches. Now I'm going to be cutting from 1 inch down to 5 inches. So I'm lining up my blade at 1 inch and I'm bringing it down to 5 inches. That should be right here, which lines up with this score line that I made earlier. I'm going to lift my blade, slide it down to 7 and cut again, this time from 7 inches to 11 inches. So now I've got 2 cut lines here. I'm going to turn my paper around and I'm going to repeat that. So again, lining it up at the 1-inch edge on the right hand side. With my blade at 1 inches, I'm going to cut from 1 inch down to 5 inches. Then I will lift my blade and I'm going to cut now from 7 inches down to 11 inches. Just make sure that my paper hasn't moved from that 1-inch side. So 7 inches down to 11 inches. And that's it for the cutting of the card. Now I'm going to do the scoring. So taking my paper and lining it up with the longest edge along the top, I'm going to be scoring at 2 inches from the top of the paper down to the bottom. Slide it over to 4 inches and repeat from the top down to the bottom. Now slide it over to 8 inches, score from top to bottom, and then at 10 inches, scoring from top to bottom. Now I've got some more scoring to do, so I'll go ahead and get ready for that. So now I'm ready to do the final bit of scoring. So lining up my paper again with the longest edge along the top, I'm going to be scoring at the 1-inch mark down to the cut line, which is at 1 inches. I'm then going to lift and move my scoring blade down to the bottom, and this time go up from the bottom to 5 inches, which is where that cut line is. I'm going to scoot my paper over, and I'm scooting it over to 5 inches, and I'm going to repeat that. So from the top to the cut line, then lift your scoring blade, then go from the bottom to the cut line. Then scooting the paper over again, this time to 7 inches, repeating from the top to the cut line, which is down 1 inch, and then from the bottom up to the cut line, which means you're scoring up to the 5-inch mark. Then the final score is going to happen at 11 inches, lining it up at 11 inches, and going from the top to the cut line. Lift your scoring blade bottom to the cut line. And that's it for the cutting and scoring. Now I've placed all of these pieces where I want to glue them. I'm not going to start burnishing or folding along these score lines just yet. I'm going to glue a whole bunch of pieces in place. So I'll go ahead and glue these in place and we'll pick up there. I've got all of my designer series paper now attached to my main base. You'll note that I lined up all of the patterns so that they matched. If you don't have a pattern that is in this kind of orientation, that's fine. Use whatever it is that you like. So now I'm ready to put on the front and back panels. So I've got the mats and the coordinating, in this case, vanilla cardstock. I'm going to be stamping any images that I want on the cardstock, attaching it to the mat. Then I'm going to place this piece on the back. This is for writing a message to the recipient. and then on the front, I'll place the other panel right here. I'll go ahead, do the stamping and the gluing, and we'll pick up there. Now I have my front panel all ready to go, and I've already glued the back panel in place. Now I'm ready to start doing the folding and the burnishing. And now for the folding and the burnishing piece. So with my paper flat like this, I'm going to be keeping this piece in the middle flat. I won't be folding any part here, but I'm going to start with these panels. So I'm going to be making this a mountain fold and a valley fold. So I'm going to kind of bring it up away from the other pieces and get it ready to fold like that. I'll do the same thing over here. This will be a mountain and this will be a valley. That will bring up this piece like so. Now you'll see that these pieces here will become mountain, valley, mountain, valley. So they will go like that. And then mountain, valley, mountain, valley. So that will go like that. As you do that, you'll be able to fold the piece in on itself. And we'll go back and burnish after. So on this side, mountain, valley, along the top. And then the same on the bottom. That allows me to fold the piece in over on itself. So now I'm going to go along, and everywhere there's a fold, I'm going to make sure that I burnish it nicely with my bone folder. And then you can see when you stand it up that this is how it all folds. Now for the last parts of the assembly, I've glued my center panel in place. Now I'm ready to glue these side panels in place. Now you remember that we cut these pieces earlier. These are going to go on the front. I'm going to be gluing on the matte and the designer series paper to each one of those pieces. And then I'm going to attach these to the front of the card. I'll go ahead and glue these together and we'll pick up there. Now I've got the pieces all glued together, and I've oriented it so that these pieces line up. I'm going to be gluing these in place on the sides. Now before I start gluing, I just want to draw your attention. You're not going to glue down these parts of the designer series paper. You're going to place glue on what you see is your base color, and then you're going to place this on top. I'll go ahead and do that. Now we're ready to score the belly band. Because this card is so thick, we're going to be scoring the belly band in advance. So taking the belly band and lining up the longest edge, I'm going to line it up at 1 3/4 and score, and then again at 2 inches. I'm going to turn the paper around and repeat. So again at 1 3/4, slide it over to 2 and score again. Now I'm going to fold and burnish along those score lines. I've prepared the front panel. I stamped the sentiment I want and attached some leaves to embellish. I cut out these pieces with the stitch-shaped rectangles. I've got the belly band now ready to go, and I'm going to be attaching it to the front like this, and I'll glue this piece to the belly band. So I'll be placing glue on the belly band itself and then placing the panel in front. I'll go ahead and do that and show you the finished card. So here we have the finished card. You remove the belly band and the card opens up nicely for display. It stands up beautifully as well. Here's one version I made with a fall theme, and I also made one with a Christmas theme. Here's the Christmas version. So removing the belly band, and you'll see that it stands up beautifully for display. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.